Yes.
Welcome, everybody. We'll just give a minute for people to join. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. Welcome once again to today's EPI-WIN webinar. This week, the topic is the utility of pathogen genomics spotlight mpox. Thank you for joining, especially for those of you who live where it's really early in the morning or quite late at night. Thank you for joining us. For those of you who are new to EPI-WIN, it stands for the WHO Information Network for Epidemics, and the Science and Knowledge Translation team. Its goal is to make science and knowledge understandable, accessible for evidence-informed decisions and actions. Today, we have a very exciting panel of speakers. To start with, the opening remarks will be given by Dr. Timothy Dahlman, who is the Senior Technical Advisor for Pathogen Genomics at WHO. He's an expert on bioinformatics as well. Then Lorenzo Subizzi, who's an epidemiologist and team lead for emerging diseases, will provide a global overview of the contribution of genomics in mpox health emergency response. Then we have Eddie Lusamaki, who's from INRB in DRC. He will provide us how mpox is used, genomics of mpox, genomics in the response to mpox in the DRC is actually taking place. And then we have two eminent panelists again to moderate your questions and answers. Caxton Murira from the Science for Africa Foundation and Greg Armstrong from the Task Force for Global Health. And finally, we'll have closing remarks by Tim Dahlman. We will now ask more about you, as you know, is the usual for EPI-WIN. But before that, some housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be uploaded to our website and shared with all of you. We will also, with the permission of the speaker, share the presentation. Please, we'd love to hear from you. And I can see already some of you who know the drill are sharing about yourself and where you come from on the chat. And it's really wonderful that we see people from all over the world. Please also share your experiences, insights, comments on the chat. I know many of you are experts in your own way, and we'd love to hear from you. But if you have questions for our panelists, please put it in the Q&A at the bottom so that we can keep track of the questions more easily. Finally, please keep your comments respectful and to the topic and constructive. This is a technical webinar to share knowledge. Let's keep it that way. And this webinar is also being interpreted. We have live interpretation in French and Spanish. So if you go to the bottom of your screen, this is globe. You can check whichever language you want to listen to the interpretation in. And with that, without further ado, we would like to hear from you. So, is my screen sharing? Please go to slido.com and hashtag 6240078. Slido.com, hashtag 6240078. We want to know whether you work on pathogen genomics for mpox. So you have the options. I work on pathogen genomics, but not for mpox. I work on pathogen genomics for mpox. And I work on pathogen genomics. Sorry, I do not work on pathogen genomics, but would like to know more. I think we see quite a few of those. Come on, we'd like to have more responses. There's 33 of you, 39 of you. Slido.com, hashtag 6240078. That's slido.com, hashtag 6240078. We have 84 responses, 96. Yeah. So based on the responses so far, it looks like many of you do not work on pathogen genomics, but would like to know more. But there's quite a few of you, 27% on pathogen genomics, but not for mpox, and 22% work on pathogen genomics for mpox. I will leave this open, so please keep the responses coming in, but I'll stop sharing my screen now. So continue to go to slido.com, hashtag 6240078. It should also be on the chat, and please continue to give your responses. But now I hand over for the technical session to Dr. Timothy Dalman. Over to you, Tim.
Thanks, Sabria, and thank you for joining this edition of the IPSN Pathogen Genomics webinar series, co-hosted by EPI-WIN, the Science for Africa Foundation, and the Task Force for Global Health. The International Pathogen Surveillance Network, IPSN, is a global network of pathogen genomic actors brought together by the WHO Hub for Pandemic and Epidemic Intelligence in Berlin as part of the WHO Health Emergencies Programme. Its vision is a world where every country has equitable access to sustained capacity for genomic sequencing and analytics as part of its public health surveillance system, and it functions to create a mutually supportive network that amplifies the work of its members to accelerate progress in pathogen genomics, improve access and equity, and ultimately contribute to improved public health decision-making. To support country capacity building activities, this webinar series aims to provide a forum for expert discussions on how pathogen genomics is being used in public health and clinical healthcare settings, and to review the evidence base for its utility in supporting decision-making and informing policy. For this webinar, we spotlight the utility of genomic surveillance of mpox, which remains a public health emergency of international concern. Today, we will discuss the use of genomics in expanding our understanding of regional and global mpox transmission dynamics and its role in strengthening the overall surveillance for public health interventions. With that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Lorenzo Sabisi, who is the interim team lead for Emerging Threats Diagnostics in the Epidemic and Pandemic Threat Management Department, also within the Health Emergencies Programme at WHO. His current work focuses on control of pathogens with epidemic and pandemic potential and includes diagnostics preparedness, outbreak response, development of guidelines, coordination of laboratory networks, and monitoring of virus evolution. Over to you, Lorenzo.
Thank you, Timothy, for the kind introduction, and to the organizers for inviting me. Let me share my screen. So yeah, I'll provide a brief overview on the genomics in the mpox health emergency response. So just a brief introduction on mpox. So it is a double-stranded DNA virus of the orthopox virus genome within the Poxviridae family, and it was historically linked, has been historically linked to zoonotic transmission, with African rodents, especially squirrels, being suspected to be involved in such transmission, but working on animal reservoir still needs to expand, and so there are endemic areas in Central and Western Africa. Central Africa is endemic for clade 1 and Western Africa for clade 2. And I think it's important to note that since the 2000s, there has been sporadic clade 2 cases outside of Africa, but never clade 1 cases. And then we had a large outbreak in Nigeria. There was a large outbreak in Nigeria in 2017, 2018. And the genomic data there suggested that there have been multiple introduction into the human population from the animal reservoir with some evidence of human-to-human transmission. So I think since 2022, we started a global surveillance in WHO. And this is the overview of the global epidemiology of mpox from 2022 to date, and with some key events that are highlighted in this timeline. So I highlighted also the time where the laboratory guidance was out, and as well as the updates. So the first laboratory guidance is that in May 2022. And this is it preceded the first fake declaration in July 2022. The peak of the outbreak was registered in August 2022, and then the first fake was ended in May of the following year. So we had, alongside with the Ministry of Health, a joint mission to DRC in November 2023 because of concerning epidemiology in the country and some shift in the epidemiology. And the same month, we also updated for the first time the laboratory guidance. And then I think a key also event that kind of woken up the mpox surveillance in the African region was the Africa CDC high-level emergency regional meeting on mpox in Kinshasa in April 2024. The month after, we published the second update to the laboratory guidance in light of the emergence of a variant that was showing some diagnostic failure for certain assays that were in use. And then that proceeded again for a few months, the second fake declaration, as well as the first declaration of a public health emergency of continental security by Africa CDC. Finally, we have the latest laboratory guidance, which was published in November 2024. Here you can see the epi curve by region for the period January 2022 and January 2023, and as well as the demographic and the symptomatology. I think just to mention that really this multi-country outbreak in 2022-2024 was driven by male sex, so with 96% of people being males, and of those who reported sexual orientation, 90% self-identified as men who have sex with men. In addition, of those with known HIV status, almost 50% were HIV positive, and there was an increased odds of hospitalization for those immunocompromised, whether this was due to being HIV positive or other immunocompromised condition. And so I think really the sexual transmission among men who have sex with men was the main driver of this outbreak, and that represented a major shift as compared to the zoonotic transmission that was historically reported. This is a tree that I think it's very important just to show you how we have been inferring type of transmission from the genetic data. And I think it's just to say researchers have identified specific mutation in the virus genome that were characteristics of some kind of editing by a human ApoBac3 enzymes, so some proteins that actually can induce mutation in viral DNA. And so thanks to this mutation, basically, scientists were able to infer that mpox has been transmitting among humans for several years, at least since 2006. So since 2016 in Nigeria, rather than being solely a zoonotic infection from animal reservoir. And so, again, this indicates really a shift in the virus transmission dynamics and highlighted the importance of really monitoring the evolution of the virus. And I think the tree is important because it shows you the dots are the viruses that are linked to zoonotic transmission, and then you can see the triangles are basically many viruses that cluster with each other much more closely, and those viruses are the ones that are bearing these ApoBac3 like mutations, which suggest sustained human-to-human transmission. So in a way, genomics has been used to actually as an early warning tool for picking up the viruses that are likely to further spread. And so I think an important event was, as I mentioned, the joint mission, WHO Ministry of Health joint mission in November 2023. And here you can see a figure from that report that is available on the web that shows on the left-hand side the age pyramid that is typical of historic transmission in DRC, with the most affected age group being 0 to 5 years old. And on the right-hand side, the clear shift in epidemiology with very few kids involved, and rather, younger age groups being involved, with also predominance of females over males, and clearly there was epidemiological investigation showed in South Kivu, which was a newly affected province, involvement of sex workers and their clients. So again, another shift in the mpox epidemiology, following the first shift that led to the clade 2B outbreak in 2022-2024. So, and later on, a few months later, there has been studies that really, with the genomics, highlighted the emergence of this new clade 1B, from South Kivu. And the interesting bit was that, while most of the orthopox virus genetic or monkeypox virus genetic PCR protocol were able to detect this new subclade, there was some clade-specific PCR that was widely used by reference laboratories to, differentiate clades, that was failing to detect clade 1B because of a deletion in the genome. And again, highlighting the critical importance of genomic surveillance. Just to note that the updated lab guidance that really described this issue was published shortly after the report of this diagnostic failure. This is an overview of the situation in DRC, and there has been a huge progress there. And you can see that the epidemic, however, is still ongoing, although there are some decreasing trends in the last few weeks. But also we have to bear in mind that key hotspots like South Kivu and also North Kivu have surveillance to some extent certainly compromised by the current armed conflict that is ongoing. So this is an overview of the countries that detected actually clade 1B. Apart from the DRC, there are 8 African countries that actually have reported community transmission, and a total of 26 countries reported at least one clade 1B case. So exportation of this clade was common. And in these 3, you actually can see that the exportation was also included. Most of the exportation was linked to travel history to African countries that have clade 1B circulation. However, some cases had travel history to other countries, highlighting also that probably this clade has been circulating in countries where and regions where the surveillance didn't pick it. So this is the overview of the situation of mpox in Africa, including all clades, so not only limited to clade 1b. As you can see, as I mentioned, the trends in DRC and Burundi, they are slightly decreasing. However, we have increasing trends in Uganda and Kenya. And I think there also is important to note the substantial increase in circulation in Sierra Leone with sequencing that is ongoing. And this is the tree that look at actually clade 1 sequences. And I think we are highlighting a specific variant that was discovered by the next speaker and the team at INRB, that has also sustained human-to-human transmission. So it's called SH2024, and is a clade 1A variant. And this variant has been detected in Ireland, and the clade 1A for the first time was also detected in China. So we really expect that is going to also fall into the SH2024 variant. But just to mention what is SH2024. So I think we have established a proposed nomenclature for sustained human-to-human outbreak. And this is just that the ASH label, a sustained human-to-human transmission label, it really aims at bridging the current clade and lineage system with an additional outbreak label. And this outbreak label is important for early warning of new viruses that are accumulating the ApoBac3-like mutation and are therefore have potential for sustained human-to-human transmission. And this is really, we see that because we have seen this with the clade 1b then being exported across the country. And now we're starting to see this with this new variant from Kinshasa, SH2024, where we're already seeing at least one exportation, the first ever exportation of a clade 1 virus outside of Africa, and potentially a second exportation also to China. So I think it's important also to note the situation in Western Africa, where another clade circulates, a clade 2A. I think there has been many zoonotic spillovers of clade 2A in West Africa during 2024. This is probably to some extent certainly also reflecting increased surveillance in these countries. And clade 2A was detected in Guinea, Liberia, Ghana, and Cote d'Ivoire, and ongoing sequencing in Sierra Leone. So we don't know whether this is only clade 2B or also clade 2A. And I think it's important to raise the question after the clade 2B, clade 1B, and recently the clade 1A linked to the Kinshasa outbreak, whether there is actually a clade 2A going to be linked to sustained human-to-human transmission. And I think we cannot say that yet because the sequencing ongoing in Western Africa is really sporadic and limited. So I think the big question is, are these sequencing going to be showing some ApoBac3 also accumulation, which would point at potential for sustained human-to-human transmission for this clade as well. We don't know that yet. And I think I also have added one slide last minute because I think it's really a nice study that looked at the animal reservoir and found these fire-footed rope squirrels as a reservoir for monkeypox virus. That doesn't mean that these are it's the only reservoir or is the reservoir everywhere, but I think this study describes really an outbreak of monkeypox virus in a group of wild sooty mangabes in Tai National Park in Cote d'Ivoire. And I think, scientists analyze rodents and wildlife carcass from the region, and they identified this firefoot rope squirrel infected with monkeypox virus, very close to the Mangabe territory. Interesting, the genomes of the squirrel and the Mangabe were identical. They even have a video record that you can see here of consumption of the same squirrel species in 2014 from a Mangabe. So it's pretty strong evidence that this is a part of their diet. And then they also found fecal samples from mangabes having containing the DNA of these rope squirrels, and one of these fecal samples was even positive for mpox virus. So very strong direct evidence on animal reservoir here. So now let me talk briefly on what we have done with the genomics data, what kind of activities has triggered in WHO. I think the interest in sourcing of clade 1 isolates for the WHO biohub that you can visit. You can find the website in these slides. Was triggered by the concern epidemiology in DRC that we characterized during the mission in November 2023, and then obviously genomic data came and confirmed the threat posed by this clade 1b emergence in South Kivu, two neighboring countries, and that already happened in early 2024. So 8 months, 7-8 months prior to the fake declaration in August 2024. And the clade 1a and 1b isolate or their inactivated DNA were shared to 40 laboratories in 18 countries for the purpose of diagnostic preparedness. So laboratories needed to get ready to be able to detect clade 1b in their country, but also for functional characterization to try to understand whether clade 1b was a more transmissible virus and which characteristics it has as compared to the other existing subclades or clades of monkeypox virus. And I think interestingly, one nation actually used this material to run a national EQA that enrolled 15 laboratories. So please feel free to go and have a look at the WHO biohub system, which is a very nice system for pathogen sharing. So we did with that material, we actually ran global mpox virus EQA led by Lisa Stevens at WHO. And this is a timeline of the EQA program. So WHO shipped the first panel of the first global EQA round in May 2023 to 145 labs in 117 countries and territories. Then, of course, as I mentioned, following our mission, the sourcing of clade 1a via the WHO biohub system started, and thanks to the DRC colleagues who have kindly shared the isolate, that we were able to prepare the EQA panel starting April 2024. So this work has preceded by a few months the declaration of the facts from Africa CDC and then the fake from WHO. And in October 2024, WHO has shipped the second round of mpox EQA program, which included clade 1 isolates to 180 laboratories in 126 countries and territories, which it's remarkable. It's more than 60% coverage in terms of WHO member states. And then March 2025, the results were released, and we are now planning the next EQA. So these are just a glimpse on the results. The panel was composed of an mpox clade 1a positive, as well as a low concentration of a clade 1a, an mpox negative that was, however, positive for another orthopox virus, and then a clade 2b samples, as well as an mpox negative. And you can see here actually the success rate was very high for all of the samples, including the sample that was orthopox virus positive, and the only samples that was showing a much lower success rate at 75% was the one that was very close to the limit of detection, as it only contained 500 copies per ml. So the conclusions from this talk, I think that really mpox genomics has allowed us to infer about which viruses spread through sustained human-to-human transmission. And so far, we had 3 strains that have signatures of this sustained human-to-human transmission as per accumulation of this ApoBec3 mutation. Those viruses are clade 2b. We call it here SH2017 because it started in Nigeria in 2017, but then the lineage B1 of this clade has actually then led to the multi-country outbreak in 2022-2024. Then the clade 1b SH2023 that emerged in South Kivu and then spread to so far 26 countries. And now recently clade 1A SH2024, who is circulating in Kinshasa and has been spreading to at least one country, possibly two so far. And you know, we may see some additional exportation of this variant. So genomics really has been instrumental for early warning of new variants with potential to spread further than the variants that were linked to zoonotic transmission, and also was instrumental for diagnostic preparedness to this new variant clade 1B that had a deletion in a diagnostic target gene, and this work was supported by the WHO BioHub and the WHO EQA program. And just to mention also very quickly that there are two WHO documents that are being developed in collaboration with the IPSN on genomics, one generic and one mpox specific. So I have two slides here. One will be titled Analytical Consideration for Genomic Surveillance of Mpox Virus, and you will have a look. You can have a look at the aims of the documents. I don't have any additional time to go through it. And then the second one is Attributes and Principle of Genomic Data Sharing Platform Supporting Surveillance of Pathogens with Epidemic and Pandemic Potential. And again, you can look at the slides later on. So thank you so much, Timothy, and everybody. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Lorenzo, for that great overview. And now it's a real pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Eddie Kingade-Lusamaki, who's a medical doctor, a research assistant at the University of Kinshasa School of Medicine. He also holds a postdoctoral position at IRD in France and is the biorepository manager at the National Institute of Biomedical Research, INRB, in the Democratic Republic of Congo. At INRB oversees the mpox genomic surveillance activities. Dr. Kingade's extensive experience in medical biology with specific training and expertise in microbiology, virology, biosecurity, and genomics, with a research focus on viral zoonosis. Over to you, Eddie.
Thanks, Timothy, and thanks to the organizer for giving us the opportunity to share regarding our experience on mpox genomic surveillance, especially, and how this helped us to better understand the dynamics of the disease. As we can see in the next slide, mpox is one of the disease under surveillance in DRC, and which is declared directly if it is suspected. And that started since 1996, as we can see in the next slide with the overview of the history. We know that the first case was a human case was discovered in DRC when we were fighting smallpox, and even after the WHO and Ministry of Health active program to try to better understand this and see if this was a threat to the smallpox eradication, WHO and intensive surveillance program provided enough data on the disease that we have to date. But after their conclusion that this was not a problem due to the second attack rates, which was lower, we had 10 years later a large outbreak in the Sankuru province, which is one of the provinces which reports a lot of cases. And that's when mpox was added onto the list of reportable disease in DRC. And we've seen that from there, we had like exportations of the mpox out of African continent in and in 2003 and 2017, and the previous speaker, Lorenzo, explained well the timeline and how we arrived to the first public health emergency of international concern declaration by WHO, as this is shown by the graph in the next slide. So out of this, one of the benefits that the next slide can show us is that we could generate enough information on mpox, which was still neglected through decades. And one of that was also intensive sequencing. And especially you can see that on GenBank, more than thousands of genomes have been added and made available publicly. But when we look deeper, as you can see in the next slide, you see that there are more clade 2 genomes, especially the variant that was responsible of the multi-country outbreak, as you can see in the next slide. There are more clade 2 genomes, and these were well characterized in different lineages from A to F. And the previous speaker told more about it. But the next slide shows from the number of genomes here we can see on GZ that less were from clade 1. We had more from clade 2, but less from clade 1. And before 2024, we had like less than 51 genomes. Slide, please. And when we look at phylogenetic studies that were done, you can see that for clade 1, 5 groups were described, with the group 1 having genomes from Gabon and Cameroon, and the other groups containing mainly the genomes from DRC and especially from Sankuru, the city that reported the large outbreak in 1996, and in the next years there were studies there. Next slide. But this discrepancy between the severity of the clade 1 and also the few number of genomes, so you can see that there was really a paradox, because the number of cases through years was still increasing. And before 2022, it was known that DRC was reported more than 80% of cases. So there were therefore an urgent need to update the diversity of the clade 1 mpox in DRC and better characterize it, and try to understand if the increasing trends we were seeing was also explained by a human adaptation. And one last thing was also to know and see if we had also importation cases from clade 2. Next slide, please. Therefore, we started working, and we did some multidisciplinary investigations, despite challenges that we are facing. We had and we are still having them. And among those challenges, you have like logistic challenges. DRC is the biggest country in the sub-Saharan part of Africa. So traveling from one point to another with less infrastructure is not always easy. We have also security and humanitarian crisis, which also make the surveillance difficult. And you could see also that in the trends, we have some years where the cases were not reported, not because there were no cases, but because of the war. And at the same time, we were using resources from the support we got from the Ebola outbreaks and the SARS-CoV-2, also to try to implement the genomic surveillance of mpox. That's how we've been able, through different initiatives like Africa Pathogen Genomic Initiative, AfroScreen Surveillance Program, Bote Project, IMREC Consortium, and all the support like DTRE or support by WHO. We've been able to start the surveillance, genomic surveillance since 2022 by looking at the samples from 2018 and trying to sequence them to better understand. Slide, please. So that's how first we got out of the investigation that we conducted in the Kwango province. We've seen that in DRC, we also had for the clade one some transmission mediated by a sexual contact, either hetero or homosexual. And this was really concerning because till that time, only zoonotic transmission were documented. Next slide, please. And another example of the results that came out of the multiple investigations we did was also that investigation that we conducted in the South Ubangi province, which is in the northwestern part of the country, as you can see on the map, and where we had some alerts on cases. And when our colleagues arrived there for the investigation, they found out that a wife had a spouse who died from mpox and who was traveling between Central African Republic and DRC. So this urged about an integrated regional surveillance strategy because DRC shares border with 9 countries. Next slide, please. And I will not take more time on this because the first speaker talked about that. But this joint investigation that was done was also a way to give more voice to what was going on in DRC, the increasing trends that were really concerning, as we can see also in the next slide. And that is also one of the eastern province which was reporting cases which was not so common because most of the cases were located in the area of the equatorial forest, but we had cases in a mining area. And what was also observed is that specific clusters were involved in the disease notification, especially sex workers. And that's how many studies have been conducted. I think Lorenzo showed some. We can go to the next slide. I will just focus on what we did so far that helped to characterize that strain. And as you can see, we clearly had an outbreak with low diversity. And the strain or genomes were also characterized by a higher rate of ApoBec3 mutation. So we had about 50%, when it is about 10 to 20% for the noun diversity that we called, therefore, that we propose to call, therefore, clade 1A, and clade 1B was the new strain that we contributed to characterize. Next slide, please. And further, we continued to work and took really the batch of samples that we accumulated from 2018 to 2024 and generated about 400 genomes to try to update the diversity of the virus. And we had genomes of high quality from 14 provinces, when previous phylogeny had samples from only 5 provinces. And the next slides will provide some results that we got from. So especially we could see that there were some phylogenetic clusters within the mpox clade 1. And on the next slide, you will see, for example, a phylogenetic cluster that we could have in the Chopo province on the left, or in the South Ubangi province in the right in pink. But this is not the only characteristic. When you look on the next slide, you can see that we also have co-circulation of different variants. So this is really critical. And this allows us to understand what's going on, that indeed we may have a lot of outbreaks in an area. Next slide, please. So to summarize that study, we could then determine that we had a clade 1A, most mediated by zoonotic transmission, and the clade 1B, which at the moment of publication was concentrated in the eastern part of the country. Next slide, please. When we published that, the preprint, I think it was also close to the double declaration that you can see on the next slide that also Lorenzo talked about. And yeah, I will not tell more about that. Next slide, please. And the final, I think I will finish with this, was also that we've been able to document the first case of clade 1 in Kinshasa. And we identified in the first cases 3 clusters. And you can see when we look at the next slide that about 1 year after the first clade 1A case, we also had a clade 1B case that we identified in Kinshasa. And therefore, we have a co-circulation of both subclades in Kinshasa. Next, please. And then the epidemiology in Kinshasa consists of outbreaks, clade 1B outbreaks with many exportations in different provinces, as you can see on the map. Next, please. And it also consists on clade 1A outbreak, and I think Lorenzo talked about SH 2024. And now also what we are observing that even within DRC, we have exportation in other provinces that could be mediated by either the traffic on the river or also airplane or roads traffic and travels. And you can see that even lastly, we saw that the Lualaba province also had one case that we identified, which belongs to this huge cluster. Next, please. And then we've been able to update the number of genomes which provides more insights. Next, please. But this still needs to continue. As I said, what we can also keep is that we also have now many provinces where both subclades have been identified, and then we can know which variant is circulating and which one is more prevalent in an area or another, and try also to prevent more consequences of that co-circulation active. Next, please. So in summary, you can see in that tree, that unrooted tree that I did, that we have the human outbreaks, but we also have the zoonotic, which is predominant in the country, and which also urge for the needs to document the reservoir, and from which the human adapted variants can still emerge. So we are not done yet. And from that, we also need to develop the strategy to increase the surveillance of that disease by including either clade differentiation, PCR, or wastewater surveillance. Next, please. So with that, let's keep in mind that genomic surveillance remains crucial to control emergencies. And we acknowledge all the partners, the colleagues, and also people working with us to support, because the cost we invest in genomic surveillance is not a loss. With that, thanks a lot for the floor.
Great, and this is Greg Armstrong. I just want to thank both speakers. Those were really excellent presentations, and we've been getting a number of questions coming in. Won't be able to get to all of them, but let me start with one. We've gotten a few questions about data sharing, and how do you balance the potential benefits that we get from being able to share the genomic data with the risks that are involved, particularly the risks around privacy to individuals' data. And I don't know which one of you wants to take that on.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, the question is about sharing data and how you do that effectively to assure that that there is useful secondary use of the data without compromising privacy or other issues like intellectual property.
Yeah, I can start, and maybe Lorenzo can add something, because we've been collaborating a lot. So I think the first point is really we need to have confidence when we are sharing data, and be clear on the terms. And nowadays, for example, we are collaborating with many partners to which we are sharing our data on demand. And also we are using some open databases like the Pathoplexus, which can also help to forward further our genomes on NCBI GenBank, but we can have the possibility to restrict the access so that everyone can have the access to the genome, but cannot use that until we make it open. And finally, I can also talk about the next strain analysis that we are doing our best to update, so that everyone can also see how this is still evolving, and we make sure that everyone is acknowledged.
And Lorenzo, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think just to say that Eddie answered already, and I'd like to mention that people think WHO support DRC, but the reality is also DRC and specifically INRB has been really incredible support to WHO in terms of a number of aspects, including diagnostic validation, etc. So it's not related to the data sharing question, but I would like to emphasize this. So thanks to Eddie and all the colleagues at INRB for their great support.
Great, and that's, I think, is a great note on which to end this. Let me hand this over to Tim for some closing remarks.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, and thank you to all of our speakers who gave a really great overview of how genomic surveillance is supporting the response to the mpox emergency, and in lots of different dimensions as well. So I think highlighting its importance in detecting and characterizing chains of human to human transmission as the epidemiological picture shifts, supporting the development of new diagnosis to detect new variants as they emerge, and helping to guide the public health interventions, to be more specific and targeted to vulnerable populations. I'd also like to thank EPI-WIN for their support as ever for co-hosting these IPSN webinars, and also to the Science for Africa Foundation and Task Force for Global Health who are supporting IPSN with the organisation of these webinars through their role as co-hosts of the Pathogen Genomics Funders Forum. We look forward to continuing this collaboration and providing further webinars on the utility of pathogen genomics across different disease applications and settings. I would certainly welcome suggestions from the participants here today on future topics that are relevant to them. And just to close, but thank you and everyone again for joining this webinar.
Thank you very much, Tim. And with this, I'd like to thank all the speakers for today's EPI-WIN webinar, and for all the participants as well who come from all over the world. I'd also like to thank everyone who's been working in the background. We have Bashir, who's been pasting various chat work in the background. Project Echo, our collaborating partners who've been working also to share the screens, support us throughout with the work of the webinar. And finally, I'd like to share with you our next EPI-WIN webinar, which is next Wednesday, as always. This will be at 9 o'clock, so that we have, the Eastern countries who often get left out will have more of an access to this. This is part 1, and we will have part 2, which will be for the rest of the world in May. So our next EPI-WIN webinar, New Face of Pandemic Preparedness. On that note, thank you once again, and hope to see you next time. And thank you to all the speakers, everyone who's worked in the background, and particularly to all of those who follow EPI-WIN regularly. Thank you. Bye.